Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I'm David Bergman, and I am the program director at NYSID for the Master of Professional Studies in Sustainable Interior Environments. And for those of you who were here this morning, I was leading the presentations, the morning session like this of the instructor innovation presentations. And for this one, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm actually very happy to turn it over to Ethan Liu. Ethan is a tenured assistant professor of interior design at the Fashion Institute of Technology, SUNY, and a principal at Metropolitan United Studio PPP LLC. He has taught courses at several universities, including Columbia University, Parsons School of Design at the New School, New York Institute of Technology, here at the New York School of Interior Design, and the Fashion Institute of Technology. He served as a program director and coordinator at NYSID from 2010 to 2018, and was actually my predecessor as the program director for the MPSS. So that's why I'm especially happy to welcome him here. Ethan received his BS in architecture from the University of Michigan and a master in architecture from Harvard University, and a master of science in architecture and urban design from Columbia University. He currently serves as co-chair of the IIDA New York College Ambassadors Committee and past president and legislative contact for IDL-NY. He's a registered architect in New York and New Jersey, NCIDQ certified interior designer, and LEED accredited professional. So quite a record you have there, Ethan, and I'm happy to turn this over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, NYSID, for hosting this session. I'm very happy to be back at NYSID virtually. And welcome to the Innovative Teaching Ideas Speed presentation. In this session, we're going to have three great interior design educators, and they will present innovative teaching ideas that they've been developing over the last couple of years in their 6-minute speed presentations. And then we're going to be followed by a gathering of our group for a discussion on teaching sustainable interior design. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box for our speakers during the Q&A portion. I believe you could just put it in directly on the Pathable chat box, which is on the website. Additionally, we also like to thank IDEC, Interior Design Educators Council, for their help in organizing and facilitating the double-blind selection process for these innovative teaching ideas. And also, we also like to thank Plybu and also Robin Reggie for sponsoring this session. Now, before I introduce the speakers, I'm going to touch upon some important threads that weave through our speakers' presentation. From this morning's presentation, I was reminded of a conversation I had a few years ago with Nadia, one of the morning presenters from Parsons, about fast interior design versus slow interior design. Now, we're all already familiar with the benefits of slow food versus fast food, and slow fashion versus fast fashion, where the fast versions of the delivery process is inherently less healthy or less resilient or has less longevity, but nonetheless is faster as delivered to us. Now, with the onset of the culture of speed, the culture of immediacy, now we love 60-minute clips from TikTok. We don't even want to bother with 15-minute videos from YouTube anymore. We have 2-hour delivery options from Amazon. We have now CNC milling machines and 3D printers, printing out furniture, homes, and even bridges now in a matter of hours. So we're in fact fighting the future by slowing things down. So are we as sustainable designers actually fighting the future? So now one could make the argument that perhaps slowing things down both improves our experiences and the quality of interior design products or spaces. Some of the LEED well-certified adaptive reuse and hands-on exploration projects you see today from our speakers, they'll start to address this particular strategy. In effect, creating spaces into products where we focus on the more meaningful and healthier human experience. Now, this is even more so important, in the time of COVID. So can we, in fact, try to recover the inherent value in what was deemed as waste? Again, going back to the notion of our circular economy. So I just wanted to set that up as a little bit of a framework for us and for our presenters and for our audience. Now, with that said, I'm very happy to introduce our three esteemed educator speakers in the order that their presentations will be shown. Our first speaker is Yunnan Q, She's an assistant professor of interiors, objects, and technologies at the Parsons School of Design located here in New York City. She currently serves as the director of the BFA Interior Design program at Parsons and is also the co-founder of Cycler Inc. Our second speaker is Erin Speck. She's an assistant professor in the Interior Architecture program at the George Washington University's Corcoran School of the Arts and Design located in Washington, D.C. She is also a lead and well-accredited professional. Our third speaker is Dr. Carol Bentel, FAIA, FIIDA, ASID, and Lead AP. There's a lot of fellows in her signature. She is a partner at Bentel & Bentel and currently serves as the chair of the BFA Interior Design program, Built Environments program at the School of Visual Arts located also here in New York City. So with that said, I'm gonna start the presentation and it's gonna run for about 18 minutes. And then we're gonna have a lively conversation afterwards with some questions. Okay, so let's get started with their presentations.
Hello everybody and welcome. I'm Yoonong Kyu, Assistant Professor of Interiors, Objects and Technologies from Parsons School of Design at the New School in New York City. I will share with you today a project titled Food Waste as Construction Material. This project is from the BFA Interior Design program. And first I'll share with you a little bit about our curriculum. Our interior design program is a 4-year program. Our students begin their first year in the foundation year, followed by 3 years of focused interior design studies. This particular course in the sophomore year, in the spring semester, has 4 phases, and this particular project is housed in phase 2, studying impacts of material selection, environmental and human health and well-being, as well as economic impacts. In Project 3, both A and B, Organic Reforming, Manipulation, and Assemblage, students are asked to keep a food waste journal. And they were also expected to document and find out what types of food waste they were creating, just from the act of eating. Here is an example of a student's food waste journal. They were asked to visually document their food waste. This exercise asks students to photograph their waste beautifully, visually challenging them to unsee what they see as trash. After analyzing their food waste, they were asked to pick at least one type of food waste to focus on, to convert, or more specifically, to recover the inherent value in what was deemed as waste. Here, you see also a written journal. They were also asked to document their findings through writing. This writing exercise gives students an opportunity to reflect on their material recovery exercise. And part 2 of Project 3 is to ask students to use these food waste materials to make into a novel material and then to study how they could connect these new material pieces without the use of glue. Here is an example where a student is exploring coffee grounds. Students were then asked to use easily available materials in their home to combine their organics and create a novel material for assembly. This particular image shows the student using coffee grounds mixed with gelatin and water. This particular student figured out how to control the temperature of gelatin in order to harden the material enough that she could skewer it with the satay stick. This another student used the strawberry tops as a food waste. By combining strawberry tops, flour, and wire, she was able to make a decorative piece that could be hung without the use of glue. Here, she can be seen steaming the food. And this particular student used eggshells as the main material for creating a novel material. By mixing eggshells, lemon juice, and sugar, they were able to create a textured piece. And this particular student used sago and gelatin to create a material that is both translucent and has good lighting quality. Here's a video showing the light and reflection of the material. Finally, this student then decided to use this particular material in his studio project. He was trying to create a screen that allowed people to be able to see past one another, but still gave a degree of privacy while still letting light pass through. This small 2-week exercise is aimed at asking students to re-examine the materials that they use in their making and construction of spaces, and hopefully through their hands-on activity of understanding how materials that are seen to be trash can sometimes be used in a different way. Thank you for joining me today. Have a wonderful day.
Hi, I'm Erin Speck, a faculty member with the Interior Architecture program at George Washington University, and both a LEED and WELL accredited professional. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to share an assignment from my Sustainability and Human Wellbeing class at this symposium. I'd also like to thank the New York School of Interior Design Teaching Green Symposium for making this possible. I'll start out with an overview of the assignment titled The Application of Green Certification Studies to a Studio Project, and then transition to 2 students who will speak about their assignment, and follow that with additional examples of student work. Prior to beginning this assignment, the class is divided into 4 groups. Each group is tasked with researching one of 4 green certifications: BREEAM, Green Globes, LEED, or the Living Building Challenge. Following this research, students develop presentations to share with the class, which provides a foundational knowledge about their specific certification. Information on the International Well Building Standards is also provided. This assignment, the application of green certification studies to a studio project, focuses on incorporating sustainable strategies and well concepts throughout the early phases of the design process. Integrating these during the early phases, programming, schematic design, and design development, places these concepts and strategies at the center of the design instead of appearing as if they are add-ons once the design is complete. Students are encouraged to integrate sketches, drawings, matrices, spreadsheets, anything that helps them incorporate the green strategies and well concepts. Suggestions of categories are provided in the assignment as a launching off point.
Hello, my name is Ariani Suwadi and I'm currently a senior majoring in interior architecture at the George Washington University. Today I will be speaking about my assignment for my basic sustainability design strategies course. The studio project that I chose to apply lead sustainable strategies and well features to is La Vito Boutique Hotel. One of the first sustainable strategies that I added into my boutique hotel was LEED and WELL's access to nature, and I did this by incorporating a green wall in mostly larger spaces where there would be a lot of footprint from user groups, this being the lobby and the restaurant. Another well feature that I added into my boutique hotel was accessibility and universal design, and I did this during my programming phase. I also added another of WELL's design features called visual lighting design, and I did this by doing 2 diagrams, one based off my foot candle recommendations by area for my ground floor plan, and then another I did a lighting density diagram. Additionally, another sustainable strategy that I incorporated into my project was the LEED sustainable strategy of air filtering and the WELL's feature of Air A13 active VOC control. Last but not least, I also incorporated the WELL feature of movement VO2 visual and physical ergonomics by creating adjustable height sit-stand desk as well as desktop height adjustment stands in the management and staff offices. My takeaway from doing this assignment is that it is important to consider LEED sustainable design strategies as well as well features when designing a space, as it can help improve a user group's well-being as well as experience in a space, and it can also help our environment by reducing our VOC levels, our water use, and energy consumption levels.
Hello, my name is Jerry Cáceres. I'm a senior in the George Washington University, and I'm majoring in interior architecture. I applied this sustainable project to my boutique hotel in Florence. Using LEED and WELL certification, I demonstrate how and where to apply these sustainable strategies within the project. First, I highlighted places where water reduction can happen. Also, I show amenities within the proximity of the area, continuing by highlighting materials and explaining how are they sustainable. I indicated incorporation of air quality strategies in this project, and I also applied biophilia and others. This project really makes you think about the importance of sustainable strategy moving forward, and how can thinking about these small steps as you move forward can enhance your final project.
We'll wrap up with two final examples of student work. The first one is an adoption center located in Central Park, New York. This student chose to integrate living building challenge strategies and well concepts in their design process. Icons from both the Living Building Challenge and well are used to indicate the specific strategies and concepts they've identified. Additionally, finished materials and innovative technologies are identified and include written and graphic explanations of how these specifically relate to this project. The final pages show all categories from both Living Building Challenge and well used throughout the project. The final example is from the next student competition. The student designed the project using LEED strategies and well concepts. Once again, we see icons used to identify each of the strategies and concepts as they relate to the phases of design. I'm pleased to have had this opportunity to share these examples of student work with you. Thank you.
The Eating and Adaptive Reuse Design Studio. Hello, I'm Carol Bentel. I'm the chair of SVA's Interior Design Built Environments program, and as an architect and interior designer, I have designed over 100 restaurants, many of which are in existing buildings, and I bring this into our junior studio. We start out with this picture. We call it the eating studio, and I asked everyone, how did we get to this point? How do we get to this juicy hamburger? From the farm, to the packaging, to the cooling, cooking, and exhausting, to the serving, to the eating, and then of course to the trash, and let's hope we do the right thing like composting or giving the food away. Goals of our junior studio, we learn about sustainability, the circular economy in the food world, and apply it to design for interiors. Learn about doing a new design in an existing building, learn about zero waste and composting, learn about how to plan reuse at the end of a restaurant's life, and learn how to connect to the community. Start out with a building that the students measure, a firehouse or a garage, something that is not a restaurant, and then we design a restaurant into that space. In this case, we started out with a very small project. We built up to a small wine bar, and then project 3 was a restaurant. Project 1 was very small. We decided it should be in a space that we knew well, and the components were also very tiny. We wanted to get product from bees, butterflies, or birds. Project 2 was a small firehouse. It was a wellness bar, so we learned about sommeliers and interior farming. We picked a larger building for the third project with 2 fire doors, found some great chefs, and worked on urban farming. Project 1 consisted of 4 classes. It was the art of eating and the double use of a small space. We picked a small space we knew well because we were in the middle of a pandemic and we wanted something we all knew. We had 2 clients, 2 scales, insects or birds for the product and the humans who would eat the product. The product path was in with the product and then out with the completed product with a desire for a circular economy. Now, we did pick a bathroom because how many of us found us in this situation during the pandemic when a space that was very small had to serve a double use? So we picked our handicap bathroom in our school. The product comes in through the window and it goes out through the door into the hallway. The product is mixed by the student in the middle, and the bees, birds, or butterflies create the ingredients for the product, which get put together and made into something that is sold to the students on the floor. Sherry's Honey Shop, she selected the bee and created these beautiful funnels in which the bee was enticed to come in, make honey, and then a mobile table where she could work, and then later on she could serve. Gavin selected the butterfly and created a small table that flapped its wings and could cover over the toilet, leaving the sink usable, and using this flapping table to create a counter from which he could sell the product. Butterflies came in, they never got into the space, they were up in the ceiling creating the nectar for his product. And he also got rid of the existing door and created his own that went with the rest of his installment. Project 2 consisted of 7 classes. We designed a wellness bar in a historic building of 2 floors. I asked the students to subtract 25% of the existing square footage. They had to save 1 fire pole because we were in a firehouse, and they had to add a wellness component. The firehouse was in Racine, Wisconsin, because we were remote. We didn't matter where it was. They had to pick a sommelier, and Zinzi picked a sommelier that had a climbing wine that was biodynamic. And so climbing wall was very much a part of his design. You could see it even on the outside of this turreted firehouse. And on the inside, if you look at the plan, you would enter, you would select one of the climbing walls. The wine was stored very nicely inside the building without any direct light. You would climb the walls to get to the spot on top of the wine storage where you would get the special climbing wine, and then you would exit from the fire pole. Project 3 consisted of 10 classes, designing a restaurant in a contemporary existing building made up of 2 floors and now a roof, subtraction of 25% of the existing square footage, and we added an urban or hydroponic farm. In this case, we picked Rescue Company 3 in the Bronx. Gavin decided to create a community garden out of this building and studied the site and the environmental factors. His floor plan on the lower floor consisted of the entry after you get off your bike. You could go to the main dining room, which is backed by the back of house area that was connected to deliveries. And he made a special spot for parents, a juice bar where they would wait for their children who were learning about food above. In the loft above, there was an area just for children where they learned how to prepare food, cook it, eat it, and compost it. And prior to all of that, they learned how to grow it on the roof. Parents would sit below where they could get light from the steps on the new roof with the garden on it. And then there was the restaurant to the right bottom. Gia took a different tack, creating a space where all the pieces were reusable for a second restaurant. Many restaurants don't last more than 7 years before they're gutted. I think this is a very viable idea in reusing parts for another restaurateur. So what did we learn? We learned about the food chain and sequencing, wellness and dining, methods to build in reuse, the benefits of bringing an abandoned building back to life, and connecting to the community, which is most important. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'd like to ask all the panelists to join us. Hello, everyone. Carol, Aaron, and also Yunan. So, just a general question for all of you, just to start off the conversation. But one very interesting thing I noticed was that, Carol, when you show that image of that hamburger, I just got so hungry all of a sudden. I was just like, oh my gosh, it's time to eat. So in looking at your presentations, I noticed that, all of you have pursued, quite innovative concepts and approaches to sustainable design. Now, it's often very difficult, and this is my own, struggle, in that I very often have to make my students unsee what they already think they know from HGTV. In other words, like, how were you as an instructor able to deconstruct some of their preconceived notions about interior design or interior products and help guide them on this new sustainable design journey? Does anyone want to take over that question first and answer?
I'd be glad to jump in.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I found that our students know more about sustainability relative to food than I know my generation does. There was a year where I asked them to pick and make the menu, and the menu was really green. It was really vegan in most cases, and I was happily surprised. So I think they know more about that because I think their generation is a little bit more in tune with that than I know mine is.
Great answer. Yes. How about Aaron or Yunnan? Was there anything that you had to make your students unsee in order for them to, have any preconceived notions about anything that you wanted them to investigate?
Yes, I think I'll jump in really quickly. From the assignment that you all saw, even just the idea of what is waste and the idea of materiality, I think that is something that we can challenge our students to unsee. I think waste and trash is a concept that exists in our consumerist society that I think is kind of related to HGTV question, right? You just build and demolish and you build and you demolish. And hearing about your struggle, Ethan, I also agree with you that I think that our students are very visual. So I think when we can challenge them to see something visually that they have thought otherwise, like taking pictures of trash, right? What they think is trash. For example, my background, you can see it, but doing it in a beautiful way, I think helps them to really rethink and re-see certain ideas that they have in their minds.
Yes, excellent points. I mean, just even looking at your background, my gosh, like that's like a piece of art, but then
that's
it's
all
actually
garbage.
all garbage. It's actually all garbage from the students.
Well, depends on where we are, right?
Right. It's all subjective. How about you, Aaron? Do you want to take on this question? Yep.
Yes, I think both Carol and Yunnan mentioned some key elements, but I also think focusing on sustainability, focusing on that one aspect of sustainability and how it's not one item, what you do for one thing impacts others, and starting very early in the design process are the key things that I pull my students back from what they think and get them to a level playing field.
Yes, no, that's a great point. Yes, Carol, you wanted to add something? Yes.
Yeah, Yunnan made me think of something that the one thing my students really didn't like or couldn't get over was composting. And I happen to live outside the city and we have a huge composting pile, and it's probably looks pretty disgusting to some people, but I think it's quite beautiful. Most of my students live in the city, and that took some time for them to get over, like, what is that mess? And I think Yunnan made it beautiful. I think that was a really cool assignment to open their eyes to that. But I think we should bring our students to some of these places. There are recycling places, at least I know around New York. There are also places they collect trash and they're not recycling. I think if they see some of this firsthand or see a true composting pile, that might open their eyes as well.
Oh, great point, Carol. Composting pile, that reminds me of a former employee at NYSID. He had said things like that were hauntingly beautiful, which I thought was really interesting. Okay, so now I have more individual targeted questions for each of you as per your presentation, and I'll just kind of throw this at Yunnan first. So as part of your presentation, you had shown this, beautiful a wall, which was a building assembly that one of your students had designed. And it was casted using the a Sogo, which is kind of like bubble tea. And, there was that video where you were shining light through it. And I thought that was just so interesting and beautiful how you made that transition from, food waste into something that was physically built. So there's a lot of physical making of things in your sophomore year at your school at Parsons. Yunnan, do you see students carry this actual exploratory process of upcycling or recycling of materials later into their junior or senior years, because this is a sophomore class that you taught?
I would say yes and no, definitely. And I think part of the culture of the studio supports that. And so it's not just curriculum, right? It also has to be the culture, the studio culture. And every semester at the end of our 15th week, the School of Constructed Environments actually go through this whole cycle of breaking down models and material parts and what can be reused and can be put into our recycled materials shelf. So I think that particular act of, in some ways, not complete circularity, but for students to re-examine the pieces they have used and the pieces that can be reused and put into this shelf that next semester other students can use, I think really supports that particular culture of making with either waste or trash or recycled materials. So yes, and no, because I think, and this is still something that we're working on, is how do we get students to rethink making and creating and constructing in an industry that very often makes and builds new things and new spaces, right? So I think no also as a question to our industry, how do we even begin to do that ourselves? I think so. It's a yes and no. I can't really answer it.
Okay. No, that's actually a perfect answer, because that was what I was getting at when I started this presentation, this whole notion of, fast interior design versus slow interior design, where, we're celebrating 3D printing, we're celebrating things that could be rapidly reproduced for the masses, but at the same time, there's this counterculture of slowing things down and reusing. And I'm so happy to hear that at Parsons, the facilities management point of view, operations management point of view, you guys collect and reuse student models and reuse their component parts for the future, kind of like paying it forward. So I think you have to almost understand a balance of both in order for both to exist. So really fantastic answer. I love it. Okay, thanks, Yunnan. I'm gonna throw the next question at Aaron. So, looking at your presentation, I think one of the most difficult aspects of teaching Sustainable Design Studio is really to apply certification research, right? I know sometimes when you talk about LEED or a certification, like their eyes just glaze over. They're like, what are you talking about? It's all math, it's all points. I have to read a 300-page document. So, and you talk about an integrated design strategy where students come into the early phases of the design process. And sort of like that was one of the keys where you can bring students in to apply that research into studio. Now, can you elaborate on how you have been successfully bridging student research with studio projects? But kind of what kind of caught my eye was that you used a lot of iconic graphics and also infographics to kind of facilitate that information exchange. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and also strategies you've actually used?
This is great. So thank you. Great question. One of the things first off, before they even start this project, students have their choice of using the Living Building Challenge, BREEAM, Green Globes, or LEED. So they select one that they have an interest in, which helps carry them further with their passion about doing this project. Then the one thing that students always want to add to their projects is a green wall. And that's great. So you want to add a green wall. What kind of plants are you trying to use? What is the ultimate goal of the green wall? Is it really just to get the check mark for that sustainable certification or that wellness concept? or is there more to it? That leads us into the conversation of there are certain species of plants that help indoor air quality. So if you want to improve the indoor air quality, think about incorporating those types of plants into your project. Now that you've decided you're improving air quality and using the plants in the interior, how are we going to water those plants? So then that takes us to the considering sustainability of water collection or reusing the existing water from the site. And they start to integrate, how can I water the plants? How can I reuse the water that's created on the site? And where do I put the collection tanks to make that happen? How do I devise a system to be able to water the plants? Then it becomes not adding a green wall. It's designing other parts to work with the green wall, and all of those things intermix in terms of sustainability and human wellness. And that's why when I help them do this assignment, it's not just focused on green certification, it's also focused on well standards and incorporating some of those concepts, because they do overlap, and it's not just a one item you're adding to a studio project. This all evolved because I watched studio presentations where studio classes had students add or design with a green, adding sustainable concepts to their designs, but they were add-ons at the end. It wasn't integrated to understand how, if you're going to have a green wall, think about there's more to adding a green wall than just the green wall. And that's why I stepped back and started to make this looking at how the things interweave, and that's how I teach it to the students, and that's how I have them explore the designs of these things. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes. It sounds very much like you first explore it in terms of a kit of parts, and then you're able to take those different pieces and create a more complex system afterwards by using the component systems. And so it's not just kind of, you know, like these stickers that you apply, like, oh, I'm just putting some PV cells and I'm done with this. But you're actually looking at it systemically, the smaller pieces, and then integrating those smaller pieces into a larger whole. So there's that learning process. Yeah.
Yes, and it's a building. As they're learning, they're building this. They're building their knowledge. They're also building their vocabulary and their understanding of the interdependencies of these, and why that is so important.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes, interdependencies. I love that word. Love that word. Yes, thank you, Erin. Thank you.
Thanks.
And my next question is for Carol. So before I ask this question, I was looking at your video presentations, and I was just like, oh wow, like, Carol, you must love designing restaurants, because one of my favorite restaurants was the one right across from the NYSID Grad Center, Blue Smoke. And I know you, Ben Tillman designed that. And yeah, I used to go there all the time. So when I saw your presentation, I was like, Carol designing a food restaurant, a food place. How appropriate. So in looking at your presentation, I noticed that you worked in 3 very different scales, from the super small, literally a size of a bathroom, to really a really large space, an entire building. And now when students were actually moving from scale to scale to scale, did they build upon any sustainable discoveries from the smaller scale space that they've actually carried through, that was a consistent thread throughout these scalar moves? Did you notice anything that was a thread or something that was consistent all throughout that you can share with us?
Well, I could, they really did focus, a couple of the students that did carry the thread through, it was with nature. And in some cases, it was just a few leaf shapes, or, you know, the flowers that would entice the bee to come in, and then it became a green wall inside. Then it would become an entire roof that was a farm. So those parts enlarged. And what was kind of interesting is I took these same students through my sleeping semester, which is in the spring, and their natural parts were even bigger, like they were collecting water from the roof that would run through the building. And so I never really thought about it now, but now that you asked the question, those students did go from very tiny idea about nature, and it just kept getting bigger throughout the entire year. Something that I continue to do the eating semester and the sleeping semester. So I might really focus on that incremental change. I think that's an interesting insight.
Yes, yes. That sounds fantastic. It sounds like almost like you're planting ideas through inception and just seeing how that small idea can evolve over time, over different semesters and or over different scales. So yes, I think that's absolutely a very critical point that you're making. And by the way, I love your background. I love that B. You talked about biophilia in nature, you know, and how something like a leaf could translate and eventually end up being a green roof. I think systemically, when you look at biophilia, biomimicry, the notion of the honeycomb, which you're, you know, showing us, becomes systemic. You know, it's pervasive throughout. You look at, you know, what NASA is using to build their spaceships. They're using honeycomb structures because it's lightweight, but yet strong. So fantastic. I can see how the genesis of a very small idea becomes a much larger whole. Okay, so we have like 3 minutes left. Okay, we do have one question from the audience, and this is a pretty loaded one. So, but I'll throw this out there and see who wants to take this. So how do you explain to students that individual action matters when it comes to climate change, and not just systemic change where government mandates are necessary? Okay, so that's part one of the question. Possibly creating a grassroots movement is a start. So that's kind of part two. So can any one of you take that on? And I can repeat this again. So how do you explain to individual students or to students that individual actions do matter when it comes to climate change and not just systemic change where their government mandates, for example, and it's forcing you to do it, versus how do you convince an individual student to do it and take individual action? We have 2 minutes left, so anyone?
Well, it's important that students take a stand, and we're teaching individuals. I think that they should take a stand. I think that's very important. I also think that there can be grassroots movements with us talking to our clients and teaching our students to talk to their clients to save. When demo is happening, you go in there, you march in there, and you tell them that you're going to give those products to a school that needs it or someone else. Just take a individual stand. And I think we have to show by our own model, and we have to talk to them about this.
Okay, sounds like you're saying getting
involved.
Other allied professions involved, the contractors and others. Okay, that's very interesting. So beyond just, you know, us trying to, you know, not use, you know, let's say unsustainable products, we have to get others involved. So we become the system of change within ourselves and not just rely on the government mandates to do something like that. So so David's saying that apparently we have 3 more minutes. So maybe does anyone else want to take on this loaded question? Individual versus systemic movements?
I was just going to say it's important to be a role model. I have my students do journal logs, and 1 week it's how did you get to and from school and work? What transportation methods did you use? Another week it's how did you eat while you were at school that day? Did you bring a lunch? Did you purchase? Did you have it delivered? Whatever. Look at yourself, look at your own life, and see what small steps you can make and take ownership of how you're choosing to live right now, because you can change it and it can have a big impact.
Okay, so I guess we have 2 or 3 more minutes.
I can also
Yuna, do you want
add
to take this on, or I can ask, or maybe I can ask you to answer the next question: is how do you convince faculty about the same thing, which is a question from Garage now. But you can take on the original question if you want.
Well, I think maybe from the original question really quickly is also like I think explaining to students that they play multiple roles. They're not just a singular person. They also, when they graduate, become interior designers who then serve their clients. So if they take with them their knowledge and then share that and educate their clients moving forward, I think it starts to expand, which is, I think, touching on Carol's point. And the second point is really challenging them to look beyond just the specification of a material and really understanding supply chain, right? At the end of the day, when you look at the supply chain, you're going to realize that as an interior designer, you do have the power to change by making conscious decisions and doing a little bit of digging deeper than what is just expected. So that's that.
Yes, great. Great answers, and great to get all of your feedback. So I think our time is actually up, and I do apologize because I'm looking at the chats, and I know Megan, Nadia, and Grajna, you have some points that you want to make, but maybe we'll save that for the next IDEC session for March. So great. So see all of you, and I will see you at the other sessions. Okay. So take care.
Thank you, NYSID and
Yeah.
IDEC.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thanks to NYSID.